So this is all about taking everything off that isn't you and being able to show up, even if your knees are shaking and your voice is quivering, that you can still have a one-on-one conversation with someone and they actually connect with you more because you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I heard this phrase years and years ago, and I've always loved it, that what people want in a speaker or, a leader or whatever is a combination of vulnerability and expertise.
Yeah.
So if
Definitely.
you let the vulnerability be there and bring the fear with you, but you're just with one person at a time, you now can let your expertise come through and people will be able to hear it more because they're connected to you, rather than being polished or presentational, because people don't relate to that.
Yeah. Hello, my extraordinary women friends. Happy New Year. I hope your holiday season was filled with love and joy and meaningful moments with those who matter most in your life. As we step into this fresh new year, I hope you're feeling inspired and ready to embark on all the possibilities this year holds. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to someone whose mission resonates deeply with everything we stand for here on Extraordinary Women Radio. My dear friend and collaborative partner, Paula Friedland. Paula is dedicated to creating a world where people embrace their authentic voices and express themselves with courage, clarity, and heart. Her passion lies in helping others unlock the power of their voice to step into their truth and share it boldly. As the creator of the transformational Soul Speaks method, Paula has spent over 20 years guiding individuals to move past fear and discover the freedom and power that come from speaking from the soul. With a background in theater and a lifelong commitment to personal growth, Paula's work is about more than speaking. It's about helping people reclaim their self-expression and live in alignment with their deepest values. Together, Paula and I have collaborated on what we call Soul Speaks from the Stage for the past 7 years. It's a speaking retreat that helps women step into their light, share their stories, and embody their message in a way that's deeply moving and impactful. Paula's mission is a movement for greater, deeper, freer self-expression, and today we are going to explore what that means for all of us. Paula brings over 24 years of experience as a counselor, a coach, a facilitator, and speaker. And in 2023, Paula was named a top 3 finalist in the North American Greatest Speaker competition. It was super cool to cheer her on. Today, I'm introducing you to my dear friend. Let's meet Paula Friedland. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Paula. I am thrilled to have you back on the show.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's been too long and I'm excited.
Yeah. And I'm such a huge fan of your work, and it's been so much fun to partner and to collaborate with you on our Soul Speaks from the Stage work. And I know it's been it's probably been 5 years since I had you actually on the show. Mm-hmm. And you were on with Liz Ann at that point. And so today we're going to focus entirely on you. And I want to start with your story because I think your story is so interesting. You were an actress in New York City. So tell us a little bit about the journey that got you to this place where, you were an actress, and then here you are, you're a coach, a counselor, you have this body of work called Soul Speaks. And so tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. Well, I was getting tired of the scene in New York City, and it's such a hard business to do. And I was trying to figure out what else I could possibly like and would be good at. And I was seeing a counselor at the time, and I thought, you know what, I can do that. And because I always felt like I'd been like a amateur counselor to my friends. I don't know if they appreciated that or not. But anyway, and long story short, I decided to follow that path, and I moved back to Denver, where I'm from.
And just tell us what you were doing in New York, because I think that's an interesting part of the story before you actually made it here, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was pursuing musical theater. I went to acting school straight out of college, and an acting school in New York called the Neighborhood Playhouse. And it was absolutely fantastic. And I was just, my mouth was agape for weeks just looking at everything about the city I'd only imagined or seen in movies. And, so then I pursued, the whole auditioning thing and, did a bunch of stuff, off Broadway and regional theaters all over the country. And then I got the best gig of my life was getting the European tour of the show Hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I
I
mean,
had
so
the
this
lead
is
in
not
that.
small stuff. This is what I wanted to make sure we actually
Yeah.
covered this. I didn't want to
Yeah.
just sweep over
Oh,
this.
thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it was my big love. And, the whole thing about really being able to express myself and singing was a big part of that. And so I had some amazing experiences there, the different characters I played and
How
working
many
all over the
years?
country. 13 years
That's what I thought. I
altogether.
thought it was 13
Yeah.
years. I mean, that's really incredible to have built a career for 13 years doing that. So
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay,
Yeah,
now
I'm
you can
so glad
fast
about
forward.
that. Okay. I appreciate that. I could do hours and hours about that, but yeah, it was pretty incredible and it was hard to give up because it was my big love. But then
Right.
I became a counselor and then found out about life coaching. I heard about that and the first session I kind of an intro to coaching that I went to, I was hooked. And that's what I really wanted to do, working with people that were high functioning, but wanted more in their lives. And so that's what I did. I got certified by the Coaches Training Institute in, I don't know, 2001 or something. It's been quite a
Yeah.
while. And then shortly after going to that school, a friend of mine that worked for Tony Robbins, coaching division, she called me up that they were recruiting coaches. And so I was thrilled about that. And I applied and went through a rigorous interview process and got selected. And then we had to go through this training and had to be selected again. It was pretty grueling. But I was selected. And so I was a Tony Robbins coach for 7 years. And that was an amazing experience. And I had clients all over the world. I still do. And so that's what I was doing for a long time, and I still am. I have a private practice in that, and that's all going well, and I love it. But also, my performer was really not happy because she didn't have a voice. And so I don't even know how a friend of mine came across this thing called speaking circles in California, and it was teaching people this unique form of getting over the fear of public speaking. And I never had a fear of public speaking, but I was a corporate trainer also, and stress management and leadership. And I would find myself, not being able to speak on my feet, needing to cling to the content. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be freer in the way I was giving trainings, and speaking circles was that. And I loved it. And so as my usual routine, I got behind that. I got certified in that. And I gave circles in that, groups that I worked with, teaching people that. And then a few years in, my friend and colleague, Lizanne Corbett, she and I wanted to take that even deeper. And so she and I took that process and we put our own spin on it. We kind of deepened the process a little bit and added a couple of little exercises that made it even more heightened. And she and I have been leading groups and workshops for, I don't know, 12 years or something, 14 years, something like that. And then she decided to move on and do her own endeavors. And so it's back in my lap singularly. And I thought, well, maybe I'll put it on the shelf. And then just seeing anybody who took Soul Speaks, I would watch them and it's so transformational. I couldn't let it go. It's the most transformational thing that I've come across. And you've talked about speaker trainings, all, many of which are good and teach you things, but this is really different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just add in a bit of my story, how Paula and I
Please.
kind of came into the mix of this was, we met, and I remember how we actually ever even got connected. Maybe Cindy Goodburn connected us.
I think so. That's what I was thinking.
And so I ended up going to some Soul Speaks work. And that was at a time when I was coming into my own speaking career, which I was one of those ones that was terrified of speaking. And I had been going through lots of different trainings. And, so I have been exposed to lots of different speaker trainings over the years. And
Mhm.
this was the one that really let me loosen up and become grounded in just being able to say whatever I wanted to be able to say. Let it come from me versus being in my head where it had to be
Yeah.
scripted. And I had always scripted myself so closely in everything that I was doing. And I'm not good at memorizing something. That's definitely not my bailiwick, if you will. And what I really discovered was that if I could let go of the constraints of having to be within a set body of okay, this is what I have to say, but instead letting it come through me,
Mm.
I started to really fall in love with speaking. And so that was probably, gosh, that was probably 10 plus years ago. I mean, I think it was probably more than 10 years ago, because it was at that time when I was, just really starting to, get on stages. And it was the thing that really set me free in my speaking. And so I went through that, and then it was like, wait a minute, this would be amazing work with my clients. And I knew what it had done for me, and I knew how important, whether it's speaking, whether it's, I mean, at the time nobody was podcasting, but so it was kind of pre-podcasting pieces, but it was really the magic sauce, I felt like, when I started introducing this work to my clients. And so I called Paula one day and said, hey, what if we put this together with my year-long mastermind program and brought some Soul Speaks into it and called it Soul Speaks from the Stage, and really enabled, take that wonderful body of work called Soul Speaks and then bring it into the work that I was doing with them on their messaging and their voice and their stories.
Mm.
And what if we wove that together? And that's been 7 years. We've done this for 7 years. I pulled it up
Amazing.
and looked at that.
Wow.
Yeah. And so as and what we know, because we've done this for all these years, is that Soul Speaks from the Stage became very magical and transformational for my clients. And it's, we get raving fans on, what that weekend looks like, and what they do. And so it's been really fun to get to play with you on that, and, just to come together in partnership on that. And it's just really been fantastic to see the results of it. I mean, we always sit at the back of the room and like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So let's back up a little bit and talk about what is Soul Speaks, and give us some of the principles around it, because I know some of our listeners are like, okay, this sounds interesting to me, but what is it? Let's go a
Yeah.
little bit deeper into that.
Okay. And it's hard to describe because in this age of doing, we're all doing more and doing more. And uh, it really isn't about doing, it's about being. And so on paper, it may look like we're not really doing much because we're allowing the words to come through. So the big principle that it's based on is when you're in front of an audience, whether that's, you know, two people or even your partner or your child, or whether that's in front of, hundreds or thousands of people, it's when you're up there speaking, you're you're with one person at a time,
Right. Right.
and only one person, this thing that we call relational presence, that, you stay with the person for about a sentence. So the reason it works so well is that no, you're never talking to a group. You're talking to one person, one-on-one conversation, and then another one-on-one conversation. And that's what creates real presence, where people feel like she's talking to me, you know?
Right.
Um, and yeah, I mean, that's the biggest principle. And it's also one of the main tenets is that I'm sure your listeners, most people I meet, people that are afraid, try to get rid of the fear,
Right.
right? And how's that work?
It doesn't
It
work.
doesn't.
Right.
It
Yeah.
just gets worse. So you bring it with you
Yeah.
in Soul Speaks.
Yeah.
Um,
The other side of it is not everybody that comes to Soul Speaks is afraid of speaking. And we've had
that's
some
true.
very accomplished speakers say that they will forever change how they show up on stage
Yeah.
because they've come through Soul Speaks. So it's not just for somebody who is fearful of speaking. It's actually somebody who just really wants to enhance their presence on the stage and really create deeper connections with their audiences
Yeah.
that they're having conversations with.
Yeah, and more authentic in the
Yeah,
way they show
exactly.
up,
Yeah.
and that's part of my story too. I was comfortable on the stage. I used this phrase that it wasn't public speaking I was afraid of. It was public meing, you
Yeah.
know,
Being
being
you.
being
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
right? And that is what we see. That's what's so exciting about it. It's not just for terrified people, it's the whole spectrum. Uh, that they just elevate the way they connect with people and being able to be, like you said for you, it set free from these constraints around memorizing content, and that you can memorize pieces, like in your talk, if you memorize the first piece and then the ending piece. But like you said, your stuff, but then you let it come here, so it's like a conversation, not a canned speech.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And it changes it. It's like when people are stepping into their stories and they really are embodying that story. And I think this is
Yeah.
part of what I actually see happens in the Soul Speaks from the Stage is over the course of that weekend, they're developing their signature talk, their
Mhm.
signature story, not their signature talk. And that signature story is in us, right? We don't have to memorize our signature story, right? And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. And when they can get out of the constraints of oh, I have to say it this way and I have to memorize what it is, it's like it really starts to flow in such a much more connected way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, we call this the anti technique
Yeah.
because, so many of these programs or, workshops on speaking, it's about sort of putting stuff on you. So it doesn't work that way. So this is all about taking everything off that isn't you and being able to show up, even if your knees are shaking and your voice is quivering, that you can still have a one-on-one conversation with someone and they actually connect with you more because you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I heard this phrase years and years ago, and I've always loved it, that what people want in a speaker or a leader or whatever is a combination of vulnerability and expertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you
Definitely.
let the vulnerability be there and bring the fear with you, but you're just with one person at a time, you now can let your expertise come through and people will be able to hear it more because they're connected to you, you
Yeah.
know, rather than
Yeah.
being polished or presentational, because
Yeah.
people don't relate to that.
Yeah. And I think what we haven't talked about here is just the evolution of this process, because if you
Mm.
can think about like the beginning of Soul Speaks, over our 3-day weekend, um, where people will often start is they'll be in their heads and they'll be projecting a message, right?
Yes.
There's a projection associated with it. And over the course of those 3 days, they learn to drop some of the masks, and they learn to
Yeah.
drop the like the projecting. They learn to just be. It's the
Yeah.
kind of that mean thing that you were talking about, right? Just to
Mhm.
be me. And so what happens is you start to see people really come into their bodies. And
Mhm.
I think that, that's one of the things when we start weaving together your work and my work, it's like, how do we step into our bodies? How do we really own, who we are and our very presence somatically?
Yeah.
And so over the course of the weekend, you see both sides, you see the evolution of who they are. And by the third day, when everyone is telling their stories, it's magical. It is just
Magical.
magical what really happens because they are fully being themselves versus trying to project a message and trying to remember a message. But it's just they go to the stage and they find the connection in the room and then they let it flow. And it comes from the heart, it comes from the soul by that point.
Yeah.
And learning to trust that, gosh, I'm not going to forget what I'm going to say. And if it doesn't matter if I forget what
Right.
I say, because I just am going to step back and tap back into me, and it's going to flow. And what happens is it's so people walk away with such a different presence on the stage. It's amazing. It's truly amazing. It's one of the things that um, as I was think through, when we first started doing this, we were trying to think about what was the right time of year to do this with my clients. And after doing it a couple of years, I knew it needed to be in the first couple of months of the year, because by the time they walked away with that, and then they turned around and leveraged that by getting on stages, getting on podcasts. And I want to just emphasize it, our stories and our presence really carries across whatever platform we're being visible on. It doesn't
Hmm.
have to be a stage. It can be, it can be
Absolutely.
conversations with your clients for that matter.
Yeah.
And so that evolution of what happens early on in the year really impacts what happens the rest of the year, because they found that comfort in their story and in their voice.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like they're never the same. And
Yeah.
people talk about that. There's the pre soul speaks from the stage, and then there's the after soul speaks from the stage,
Yeah.
because, and it's remarkable. This is
Yeah.
not exaggerated or hyperbole. We see it every year in 2 full days, they get to that point.
Yeah.
And then they get a videotape of their talk,
Yeah.
and w- we just have our mouths open, right, the whole time, and
Totally.
seeing what comes through somebody.
Yeah.
So it isn't like you need to do a year-long program to even start to get this.
Yeah.
It starts to happen over those 2 days, and it is fun, isn't, like you said, that we watch people go. We can tell when we see somebody who's in their head,
Yeah.
and their
Yeah.
eyes are kind of going back and forth, and they're trying to figure it out, and we can literally see it drop
Right.
down.
Yeah.
uh,
So the
it's
masks
it's
come off. It's
yeah, the
magical.
masks come off, and
Yeah.
like you said, in their bodies, and a more relaxed way to be,
And to
you
be who they
know.
are. And I think that's a big piece of this. It's not to try to be, like somebody else. It's like if I tried
Yeah.
to be a Tony Robbins speaker, it would be so inauthentic, right?
Yeah.
But if I can be me of who I am, and my role is to connect with the people in the room, that's where the magic really happens. So if you think about, as our listeners, just think about who's in the rooms that you're speaking to, and
Hmm.
what if you could connect even more deeply with each person that's in that room. That's where the magic really starts to happen, where they resonate with you, they feel you, they understand, they connect with your story, and they feel you energetically. And I think that's a big part of
Absolutely.
this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I love that you said that, because being every speaker is different, because every person is different.
yeah.
So it's not supposed to be. We don't need another Tony Robbins.
No.
We just need another you, whoever's
Right.
listening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love
Yeah.
that you said that. Mhm.
Yeah. So if anybody is saying, okay, when is Soul Speaks? Let me just tell you, it is February 6th through 8th, coming up in just a couple of months. And we've got some spots open. So if we'll put the details of where you can access that in the show notes. But I want to keep going on along. I want to hear more of your story, Paula, because you've had a really exciting year this year. You've been working on your one woman show. You
Mhm.
have a song that's been produced. Is that the right word? Produced? The song's been
Yeah,
produced.
recorded,
Yeah. Yeah.
produced. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you've been working on. And I know this calling back to the theater was there for you, right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I've never been a really I'm an unconventional kind of person in all the things I've done, but realizing that the performer in me uh, can can have different ways of coming out without having to be in New York or LA. And I wrote a one woman show. It's taken me 4 years to get it to this point. I wrote
It's
all the
fantastic.
songs,
I've seen it.
and yeah, that's right. A few of you got to see the reading of it before we do a full staging. It's called Collecting Myself, and it's really about uh, purpose, and what the heck is purpose, and how do we find our purpose. And it's funny and it's touching. And I wrote all the music to all the songs, all the lyrics, and then co-wrote a bit of the music, and then I worked with some other people with the music. And then there was one song that I decided to record called "The Rise of the Woman," because your tagline, yeah, right. That's like your tagline is the perfect thing. It's like we need women's voices. It's the medicine that we need, and so that's where our own journeys go so well together of raising women's voices, and that's been I've realized even through the writing of this show as it developed that my purpose really, we find our purpose as we go, right? It isn't one thing, and it's who we are, not a thing we do. But really, what I've realized over many years is the voice is my purpose, is getting my voice out there in terms of my own expression, and then helping other women and men also getting their voices in the world in whatever way they choose. And I express this statement that I'm really creating a movement for greater and freer and deeper self-expression. And I cover that in my show. I cover that in Soul Speaks hugely in my work with people. That's the key, our voices, because there's no voice that's alike, and we need every single one of them.
I love that so much. I just really feel it, and I'm excited for all that's launching. And we'll make sure that we put links to where people can hear the song, because I think that's really important that that women hear the song. It's a great song. And then also, when will the one woman show be?
We're still looking at dates, but probably, mid-spring at some point.
Excellent. Excellent.
Which makes me scared because I have a lot to memorize, because that I have to memorize it. But it's interesting though, because I have to memorize it for the most part, because there'll be sound cues and, lighting cues. But even still, it's using Soul Speaks so that it comes through me in an organic way. And if I did 8 performances, they'd each look a little different, because I'm allowing it to come from where I am in this moment. And that's how Soul Speaks works too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the diagram that I always show, that we talk about how we embody our messaging. So I'm just going to walk through that, because I think it's pertinent to this. It's like we have, we can get up in our head and we can, be, like, oh gosh, we have all these self-doubts and the things that might show up for us. And then we start to feel comfortable and confident in our messaging. So I'm just thinking along the spectrum. We start to feel confident in our messaging, and we can still have that just presence, and like not like a deep presence, but just like almost a projecting presence, right? And then the next layer is where we just become so comfortable in our skin. We become just embodied in what our messages are. And this is what you do so beautifully, right? As you are so embodied in your message. And that's where, once we become embodied in our message and we're bringing our voice out into the world, that's where we become change makers, right? We become movement makers. Yeah. And so when you talk about, and when you look at the theme of your one woman show, you're obviously into the embodied state, but the core message that is there's this whole, that's the movement that you're leading. And it's exciting to see that, like just owning this movement that you're putting out into the world. So it's fun. And so for anybody who's thinking about, their speaking trajectory, like you get comfortable and you get confident and can be confident on the stage, but there's a whole nother level that you can get to if you find a way to just embody your message. And that's, I think, what Soul Speaks really does in the mix of all of this.
Yeah. In every arena, like you said. Exactly. Imagine if you're in a networking event and they can tend to be formulaic. What if you showed up?
Yeah.
And you really came from yourself.
Yeah.
People are going to go, I want what she has,
Yeah.
whatever. Because again, when people feel you embodied in yourself and your message,
Mm-hmm.
they get that authenticity, and they're more open to hearing what it is that you're providing,
Yeah.
whatever your service is.
Yeah. That's so good. So good. So I'm excited for this show of yours to come out. I was really blessed to get to see the preliminary viewing of it. And I'm excited for this, for you stepping back into the theater and giving yourself that
Mm,
space to create like you've been doing. I think that's really, really important. And, so all of us, we have to listen to that. What are we being called to show up within our gifts, and how are we being called to show up in our gifts?
yeah.
And I think that's what you really modeled so beautifully there. It's like, yes, you've got a business that's working. You could just sit back on your laurels on your business if you wanted to, but there's more that's calling to you. So,
Yes.
congratulations in really stepping into that.
Thanks. It's
Yeah.
it's true. And I think sometimes we think, oh, I can't do that other thing, or, whatever. And I love that, like listening for what's calling you.
Yeah.
And, that's why, the messaging of knowing what your message is, sometimes people's messages change when they're really embodied
Yeah.
and they're called in a different direction, or they get new insight about the message they've been given. And yeah, I mean, I thought when I left New York and, started this career as a counselor and coach, I thought, oh, that's done. The performing, that I'm done with that.
Yeah.
And, then in graduate school, I ended up connecting with a singer songwriter, and we were doing open mic nights. And then I found the other person in the program who was an actress, and she was doing drama therapy with kids in residential treatment, and then it just occurred to me, like, duh, Paula, this wasn't a hobby. This is part of who I am. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it in the same way. I didn't want to audition for people's shows anymore and have to do, I don't know, whatever part they say that you're good for. And that's what made me decide to start to do my own shows about things that are important to me,
Yeah.
and being able to use all of my different gifts, to speak about what's important. you
Yeah.
know you're so right. I mean, I'm pretty overwhelmed right now in all the things I'm doing, but if I weren't, I'd have that tug inside me all the time,
Yeah.
and this idea, I forget who said it, was it Thoreau, that we don't want to go to the grave with our songs still in us.
Yeah.
And that's also the messages that we put out there, like,
Yeah.
your message is important and your voice is important.
And there's
So
one piece that we didn't cover as part of your story, which I think is really important, was the moment where you actually lost some of your range of your voice. So can you,
yeah.
I think it's an important part of this. And as I'm listening to you talk about what you're just saying here, I think of myself and my horses. It's like, the horses are an intricate part of me, and
Yes.
needing that always in my life. And so we have these threads that are so important to us,
Mm,
so deeply entrenched into who we are, that we need them. And it's not always, I mean, it's like how I ride today is very different than how I rode 20 years
yeah.
ago. And so tell us a little bit about that story for you, because I think that's important to add into the mix of this, because
Mhm.
we've all got something that is that intricate thread of who we are, and it can shift and change. And I think that's important to bring into the mix of this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll keep this as short as I can, but in 2008, I had been I rediscovered my performing, and I had, my voice was better than it ever had been. I was studying. My range was huge, and I had co-written a show with my friend, and we're just about to launch it, and I got a cold, which any singer has gotten a cold before, but it turned into laryngitis, and we had to postpone the show and wait for my voice to come back. And my speaking voice came back fine. but my singing voice came back with this horrible grinding sound right in the middle. And I was like, what the heck is that? And went to the specialist, and I ended up with this thing called vocal cord paresis, where the virus settled into the nerves of the vocal cords and made them so they couldn't meet. So they gave me all these things to do. They said, no problem, it'll be back in, a month or two. It didn't come back. And this started a rigorous routine of working with a voice pathologist. And it would seem like it was back, and then it wasn't. I got collagen put into my vocal cords twice. And it was one of the worst things that ever happened to me, because I was a singer since came out of the womb. And it was a dark night of the soul, which we all have in different ways, different things that happen to us. And I didn't sing for a long time. I'd hear other people sing, and I'd just be heartbroken inside. I had a part of the upper range and I had the lower range, but every song has a middle. And it was just devastating until this one day I heard this voice, so to speak, come from inside me saying, Paula, what are you doing? I'm your singer, and you've just thrown me away because I'm only I'm broken, and I'm only a partial piece of what I used to be, but I'm still here. And I recognize that, you know, that isn't this love of mine of singing more important than having a full range, even if I have to sing, limit what I sing. And I realized, and I'd heard this story before about somebody who was a concert pianist, and lost use of one of his hands. And he recognized over time that music was more important than playing with both hands. And so that's a metaphor for
Totally.
others too, right?
Totally. I mean, it's like there's so many ways we can apply this in our
Yeah.
lives, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what we do with the hardships that come our way. And that for me became the theme of the voice. Became, I'm like looking at, to God or the universe saying, really? My voice? I mean, we never think these things are going to happen to us. And so that became an even more profound need to have people see the importance of their voices,
Right.
and that they can be taken away from us. We take them for granted. Well, I'll wait till next year to, take a speaking training, or I'll wait till next year to join a program that could help me get my voice out there. There's time, and, I don't have the money, and, I get all that. I've said all those things, but what is your voice and your message worth?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you don't use it, you could lose it.
Yeah.
you know
And I think right now, it's, as you know, I so believe that our voices are meant to make a difference. I mean, it's like such a
Yeah.
huge thing. We have things we need to be putting out into the world and leading. Each person listening has something that is a gift to our world, and to hide is not going to serve our world, and it's not going to serve you. So really finding that space to own what it is that your gift is for this world and step into it is so, so important.
Just gotta chill.
Yeah. Thank you for
No
sharing
hiding.
that story, because
Thanks for
I think
asking.
it's just such an intricate part of, and I just, every time you talk about the passion around voice, Paula, it lights me up so much, because our voices do matter. So keep speaking that. It's really important, I think, for our world.
Thanks.
So,
I appreciate that.
where can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, paulafriedland.com. I'm kind of in the middle of combining the Soul Speaks website and my own website. So you can get all the information there for a short time right now. Soulspeaks.biz has Soul Speaks information as well, but I am updating that and then combining those together.
And then if you're interested in the Soul Speaks from the Stage, that's all over on my website, so that you can access it there. So that's real easy. We'll drop that into the show notes for sure.
Yeah. You guys don't wait.
You run Soul Speaks training on a regular basis. That is like your core program that you've taught for many years. And so that's one aspect of Soul Speaks. And then the Soul Speaks from the Stage is the once a year that we do in
That
February
you and
every
I
year.
do,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I'm elevating, that's one of the big things that I'm working on. I decided to, that Soul Speaks want this new evolution of Soul Speaks. So in this coming year, I am going to be doing more offerings and different kinds
Cool.
of offerings so more people can partake in it.
Excellent.
So
I
watch
know,
for
because
that.
everybody wants more after they go to the weekend.
They
So
do.
yeah,
They do,
yeah,
without exception,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, totally, totally, totally. And
So,
then, of course, the final question I always close with are, what are 3 pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave with us today?
no, no pressure. Um, well, one of them is really the tagline of Soul Speaks, which is you you can change the world by being yourself.
Mhm.
And that's the God's honest truth. Otherwise, why would you all be born different? The 8 billion people on the planet. Um, what else? That that what people want in a coach or a leader or a speaker or whatever is not perfection. It's authenticity.
Mhm.
Um, and that means you got to bring all of you, warts and all. And if
Yeah,
you wake up and you have a crick in your neck, oh no, I can't speak. Yes, you can. You just bring the crick with you because it doesn't change you or your message.
yeah,
So that, and then what else would I say? Um, just the Soul Speaks message is also that you can create content in a different way than just from your head. The Soul Speaks, I do almost all of my content comes from just saying it out loud and recording it and then pulling pieces from that rather than this memorization. Oh my gosh, because if you lose your place in your memorization, then you want to run screaming through the street, versus, oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Let me take a moment. Oh, there it is. That's what I'm talking about. So you don't have to be perfect. All those three things fit together. People don't want perfect
yeah,
or polished.
yeah.
So come with you. That's what people really, really want.
Love it so much. Paula, it's such a pleasure having you on today. You're a dear friend, and so get I so appreciate everything that we get to do together.
Me
And
too.
thank you
It's
for
such a great thing that we've discovered. I couldn't and just working with you and having fun and watching what happens for people as they go through all of it is so magical and profound.
yeah.
So thank you, Cami. Thanks for having me on again. You do amazing work in the world, and I'm so grateful and happy to be part of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And come join us, everyone, at Soul Speaks for the Stage,
Come,
February 6th through
please.
8th. It's going to be amazing.
Don't wait.
It's always so much fun to see who's in the room, and it's always magical.
It
So
is
come see us. You can get
always.
all the info on my website at camigellner.com, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.